Hello and welcome to the Days of Yore. Today we'll be speaking about Beaubears Island's penultimate owner, August Butenschon, a gentleman from Norway who owned the island for a brief period between 1919 and 1920. So I'll begin, as I always do, by saying that I'm not really an expert, and what I'm presenting here is mostly just for narrative purposes. So let's begin. Just a little bit of background on Mr. Butenschon. He was descended from two families who were transplants from Denmark to Norway. His paternal great-grandfather was a merchant and banker in Oslo. As was his paternal grandfather. So his great-grandfather, a merchant and a banker, and his grandfather as well on his father's side. His maternal grandfather was the commander of the Norwegian Yore Corps in 1818. And his father was the Italian consul, represented Italy in Norway. And eventually August took the name Butenschon from his mother and adopted her surname for his business life. So Mr. Butenschon came to Canada and the United States in the period between about 1919 and 1921, and it was during this time that he made very close contacts with the Canadian industrialist Sir James Dunn. Of course, a native New Brunswicker in his own right, born in St. Peter's, part of what is today Bathurst, and a childhood friend of Max Aiken, Lord Beaverbrook. So it was with the backing of this gentleman and in this relationship with this industrialist and financier that August Butenschon began a relationship here in Canada and in the United States with the lumber business. And it was during these years that he became a figure in the lumber industry. And in 1919, he purchased Beaubears Island from Florence McCain. Florence had owned the island from 1906. So after a 13-year tenure, she sold Beaubears Island to Mr. Butenschon. Now, Mr. Butenschon had plans for Beaubears Island. We know this from the newspapers of the day. And these plans were such that the picnics and ball games and things of this nature, the recreation that had taken place on the island, really had to stop. And so, not long after buying Beaubears Island, Mr. Butenschon ran ads in the local newspaper saying that the island was again private property, and that those trespassers on the island would be dealt with in a prosecutorial fashion. So with that in mind, I'm sure many people in the area were very interested, if not somewhat concerned, to see what was going to happen on Beaubears Island. Well, we do know from an article in the Union Advocate that Mr. Butenschon was going to build a house on the island. He had already dug the foundation for that by, I believe, August of that year. So he had plans to build on the island, and he also had begun a reforestation plan as well. As you may know, and as you can see in this picture from 1931, the near end of Beaubears Island, nearer to where I am here in the Interpretive Center, was not well forested at the turn of the 20th century. Years of shipbuilding, people living on the island, and a number of activities that had taken place afterward, as well as a fire in 1901, had really seen that end of the island, and not, I guess, the eastern end, as we would understand it today, not well forested and somewhat bare. So he, according to this newspaper article, had a plan to reforest Beaubears Island. Unfortunately, I'm not sure to what extent that plan was realized. The house, as far as I know, was never built. So Mr. Butenschon went to Boston, went down into the New England states for the winter of 1919-1920, and in April of the following year, in 1920, Mr. Butenschon sold Beaubears Island to the O'Brien Company, O'Brien Limited. Of course, we very popularly understand him selling it to the chief operating officer of that operation, J. Leonard O'Brien. Again, and he sold it for $1. Now, there must have been some confusion over the sale, or perhaps there was some difficulty there in some way, because 5 years later, Mrs. Butenschon, Mrs. Bodil Butenschon, reached out to Leonard O'Brien through her attorney, looking for her share of the sale of Beaubears Island. And of course, Leonard O'Brien paid her $1 as well. So perhaps the brief time that August Butenschon spent on Beaubears Island, perhaps his leaving here and selling the island for such a small amount of money has lent itself to rumors about what he was doing. There's an interview in the archives of in the archives in New Brunswick that suggested that perhaps Mr. Butenschon had been carrying on an extramarital affair on the island, and that he sold the island quickly on account of being discovered. Other than that interview, there seems to be no record of that. But again, I suppose in the newspapers of the day there probably wouldn't be. So I guess that's something that's left to the historian to decide. But as I say, it could very well have been that a man in the midst of any number of businesses just simply couldn't realize this one. Perhaps he got a better deal in Boston. Perhaps new prospects called out to him. It's unclear. What we do know is that Mr. Butenschon, perhaps the first owner of the island to really take an interest in the forests of the island, the first one to really look at the island as a natural space, as opposed to an industrial space, or as a recreational space. The first people to do this probably in quite a number of long years. So in that respect, certainly a unique owner of the island, one who I'm sure that my colleague Ken Walker could very much appreciate. And so I think we'll leave it there. August Butenschon, the next to last owner of Beaubears Island, and a very interesting character in his own right. And speaking of Ken, he'll be back next week with a new episode of The Living Island. I will see you in 2 weeks' time. And before I go, I want to remind you again to please consider, if you're enjoying these videos, please consider liking these videos, subscribing to the channel, and if you're able, have a look at the Patreon link in the description below about other options, and have a look at that exclusive, and have the opportunity to partake of that exclusive content, which is now available to those patrons at the island magnate level. So again, if you're able, please consider doing that. And of course, when and if you're able, please consider coming visiting us here in Nelson and on Beaubears Island. Is certainly a very fulfilling experience. Well, I think I'll stop there, and I will see you again in 2 weeks for the Days of Yore. I've been Dr. Sean McCarthy. Thanks so much.